The anti-theistic philosophies of the world, they come in a bunch of different categories. If you've ever read or seen, we used to have it in the bookstore. It's kind of expensive, and we don't always keep them in there, but David Nobles has a book entitled Understanding the Times. And he talks about the five world views that oppose Christianity in our day. And I've been more through history. But there's secular humanism, which you hear a lot about, which is just another form of materialism. Marxism, which is the dialectic materialism of communism. The New Age, postmodernism, and Islam. And those five worldviews have a tremendous influence on people's thinking. You hear a lot of discussion among evangelicals about postmodernism. You should try sometime to ask somebody that talks about it for a definition of it, because they don't really, it's strange how when we were going out to Trinity for the summer conference several years ago, they had a big conference the week before we were there, and one of the big deals was postmodernism. They had all this literature laying around, and I collected up some of it and sat and read it. And they were railing against postmodernism, and I kept looking for, well, maybe somebody will define it. I just want to know what they said. Postmodernism is, you know what modernism was? They use a term now, they call it modernity. Well, you know, you got to, I've often said you can't charge somebody $40,000 for an education if they just talk like somebody that walks down the street. You got to teach them to talk different and act different. And so modernity and realism and idealism and all that stuff that, you know, you go rationalism and all the philosophies of the past couple of hundred years. But postmodernism, relativism is really what they're talking about, and it's just Genesis 3, is that there are no absolute standards, and that we're beyond the idea that there's any absolute standards, and everything's relative and that kind of a business. And there's a group now that's called the emergent church. You know, you went through the charismatic movement, and that all went to seed, and then you go through the megachurch movement, and that's all gone to seed. And now the big deal is the emergent church. And every time I read these things, there's all this stuff they're identifying it and just delineating it and trying to refute it or promote it. And somebody says, what do you think about that? And I just keep thinking, it's just Genesis 3. Go study Genesis 3. Forget all that stuff, and you got it. You didn't have to buy 30 different books that somebody wrote to try to tell you what's going on. Genesis 3's got it all right there for you. It never gets any further than what's in Genesis chapter 3. But all these isms and schisms and all that kind of stuff that goes on, whether it's, you know, there's polytheism, that there's this plurality of God. Hindus are polytheistic. They got 30,000 different gods. Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 8, the Lord's many and God's many, but to us there's just one God. There's all kind of demonic activity out there people can look for, but there's really only one creator. Pantheism, God and nature are one. You hear it talked about animism. A lot of folks, you know, and it's really a superstition, but a lot of folks believe, you know, anything happening out there, God's doing it, that kind of stuff, God and nature all together. Then you have the opposite of that, materialism, where the material substance of the world, of the universe, is really all that there is. And it's the explanation for everything. And by the way, materialism, that's the basis of communism and that kind of stuff. You have deism. Deism is that God created everything, but then he just, you know, set its sails up, filled its sails with wind and sent it off. And that God, though there's a personal God, a personal creator, he created the universe, then he set it loose to go take care of itself. And he has no more interest in it. And a lot of times you hear about our founding fathers being believers or something. Thomas Jefferson, Thomas Paine, David Hume, people like that, they were all deists. And they don't believe that God intervenes or cares about his world at all. By the way, sometimes people accuse us of being deists when we talk about God not intervening directly in the affairs of men today. Now, the fact that he did in the Bible and miraculous things would disqualify us from being deists, but also the fact that we understand God does work. And that's why sometimes I'll emphasize the fact that never say God isn't working today. He is working. He has a plan that he's executing, and you are personally involved in that plan. And you have to emphasize that so that you don't fall into the idea that he's off somewhere. But as Robert Anderson wrote the book, The Silence of God, the heavens are silent today. God isn't intervening today, but we understand why. He isn't physically intervening miraculously today, although I think you could call regeneration a miracle, couldn't you? You know, so there are miraculous things, but they're just not the physically manifested miracles of time past. Do you believe in miracles? Well, if you believe the Bible, you do. If you believe in Genesis 1:1, that's sort of a miracle. And, you know, creating everything and so forth. So it's just a matter of we understand why it's that way. And, you know, you're going down the list, the idealism and positivism, and there's not much monism anymore, but evolution, that kind of stuff, all these different ideas that try to get rid of God. And all they're trying to do is get rid of the first verse in the Bible. And the reason they try to do that, Proverbs chapter 18, better is the poor that walketh in his I'm sorry, that's 19. Proverbs 18, through desire. And that's the word in this passage you want to notice. Through desire, a man having separated himself, seeketh and intermeddleth with all wisdom. A fool hath no delight in understanding, but that his heart may discover itself. Now there's an indictment right there on human intellect. There's an indictment on the education system of our world. A fool hath no delight in understanding. But why does he study then? That his heart may discover itself. That's why he studies. He wants an alibi to do what he wants to do. That's why verse 1 says, through desire. Through desire for what? To discover his own heart, to do what he wants to do. A man sets himself apart and seeks and intermeddleth with all wisdom. When you abandon God's Word as the source of wisdom and truth and go out in the human viewpoint, there's a motivation issue. And the thing about the Bible is it ties the rag on the bush about what people's motivation is, even when they don't and can't. And so when you find people arguing that there's no God, it's not because they don't understand there's a God, or that they can't know that there's a God. It's because they don't want there to be a God because they want to be God. Our whole culture is designed to promote that. If you look at Psalm 10, why standest thou afar off, O Lord? Why hidest thyself in times of trouble? The wicked in his pride doth persecute the poor. Let them be taken in the devices that they have imagined. But the wicked boasteth of his heart's desire, and blesseth the covetous, whom the Lord abhorreth. The wicked, through the pride of his countenance, will not seek after God. God is not in all his thoughts. Now, man, you read that and you say, okay, now I figured out why people don't find God, why they don't believe in God. It's through the pride of their heart. His way is always grievous. Thy judgments are far above out of his sight. As for all his enemies, he puffeth at them. He saith in his heart, I shall not be moved, for I shall never be in adversity. See, he's got a heart attitude. If you go down to verse number 11, he saith in his heart, God hath forgotten. He hideth his face, he will never see it. The guy's nuts. The psalmist says, arise, O Lord, O God, lift up thine hand, forget not the humble. Wherefore doth the wicked contemn God? Why do they despise God? he hath said in his heart, thou wilt not require it. I'm not going to give account to God. I'm not going to allow him to hold me accountable. I'm just not going to. He said in his heart, there's no God. I'm not accountable. And see, all of those kind of things come from a heart problem. Now, you can be religious and have that heart problem, by the way. So all of the ideas about there being no God and getting rid of God and all that kind of stuff really comes from rejecting the revelation that God gives of him. You can't know God except God tells you who he is. You can know there is a God. Romans 1 says that. Every person born knows two things. One, you know that there's a God, and you know that you're going to face him in judgment. You know that because of the essence of your creation. You're a spirit, you're a soul, and a body. And your spirit is designed to be the part of your essence that connects with God, and since it's cut off, your spirit never is able to function adequately and appropriately for the purpose for which it was created. That's where the philosopher came up with the idea that there's a God-shaped vacuum in people. That's why people are incurably, did I finally get it out right? Incurable. Now, why can't I say incurable? Incurably. I'm sort of like George Bush with nuclear. You know, I say one form of it in case I say the other. People just are religious by nature. And the reason for that is you've got a part of you that's designed to be in touch with God, and yet it's cut off. That's your spirit. But you're never going to get plugged into God unless God reveals himself. The thing is, he has. He has made himself known. That's what the Word of God's all about. That's what the Bible's about. Jesus said, the words that I speak unto you, they are spirit and they are life. That's how God communicates with us, and he does it on a spiritual level. I said to you last time, we went over the verses I think about when you and I communicate. We communicate really on the level of our spirit. If we're going to communicate in words. Now, you can communicate with body language, you know, make somebody, you know, snarl at them and make them think that, you know, you're mad at them. My daddy used to say when somebody, you know, did something like that and gave you a funny look or ignored you when it went by, my dad used to, my wife's not here so I can say this, my dad used to say, well, maybe he's constipated. Well, you've been like that, you know, and make some funny-looking faces when you're trying, you know, and it's got nothing to do with anybody but just your uneasiness. But people see you do that, and they look at you, and they will interpret what's going on their way. But if you're going to communicate with people in words, you do it through, it's your spirit, my spirit, communicating back and forth with words. The words go in, and what knoweth the man save the spirit of a man which is in him. So we communicate. So when you're going to communicate with God, it's going to be on that level because that's who God is. And he's fixed you to receive communication from him. But you can't find it unless he sends it to you. Now, lost people, Ephesians 2 says that Satan is the spirit, the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now works in the children of disobedience. Satan takes advantage of the absence of God's spirit in your life, and he communicates with every lost person communicates on a spiritual. Your spirit isn't dead in the sense it doesn't function. It's dead in the sense it's cut off from God. And it's influenced by the God of this world, the spirit of the world, the spirit that now works in children of disobedience.